Welcome, believers. Welcome, conspiracy theorists. Welcome to the wonderfully weird world of the Tinfoil Hat Fan Club, where we talk about all the batshit crazy stuff that goes on in the world, and there is loads. Right, on today's episode, I want to continue with the Jennie Henderson story, okay? Now, we covered part one last week, and if you haven't seen it, please check it out, okay? It's on my YouTube channel, so check it out. On this episode, we're going to cover Jennie Henderson part two. And if you're interested, stick around and I'll tell you all about it. Welcome back, believers. Welcome back. Thanks for sticking around. So we're going to continue the story of Jennie Henderson. Okay, now, it starts, this story, January 1988. Now, without a doubt, at least in terms of sparking her memory of the reoccurring encounters, was the event of January the 16th, 1988. Now, this happened at the Hendersons' New Hampshire home. At the time of the incident, the following morning, Jennie could only recall partial memories of what she attempted to tell herself was a dream. However, under hypnosis with Marden, she recalled much, much more. Now, several hours after they had all drifted off to sleep, it's late at night, isn't it? Jennie was awakened by the sound of their pet dog barking. Now, under hypnosis, Jennie would recall at first thinking that the dog's barks would awaken the entire household. Then suddenly, the barking stopped. She then felt someone's presence in her room. Now, by this point, Jennie had sat up in bed. As she turned towards the door, she could see three of the strange entities heading towards her. Now, under hypnosis, she would state that she thought this was over before becoming increasingly agitated and tense, so much so that Marden had to calm her on several occasions. So this one incident, January 1988, has freaked her out. The next thing Jennie realised, she was off the bed and moving, although she was under the control of the entities. She would state in her hypnosis session that she was going towards the window through to the outside and that the creatures were around her and moving with her. Then, with no recall of having entered it, she was in a hallway with a non-human escort who seems uncannily familiar to her. Now, what is interesting here is that several researchers, perhaps most predominantly a bloke called Bud Hopkins, highlighted how almost all abductees are unable to recall the point of entering the spacecraft itself, or can recall approaching it, almost like the scenario here, being floated upwards in a strange beam of light, and then their memories suddenly skip to being inside the UFO. Hopkins would propose that the abductees might be intentionally incapacitated prior to entry, and that is simply to make them more calmer and docile. Now, with this last point of Hopkins in mind, it is perhaps interesting to note that Jennie would recall feeling instantly calmer when finding herself in the hallway of the UFO. It is also interesting to draw attention to the non-human who looks similar to herself, if, as some researchers such as David Jacobs suggest, for example, that a hybridisation program is behind these repeated alien abductions. Then might this non-human entity have been an alien-human hybrid based on Jennie's DNA? Now, we will return to this point later because hybridisation programs is a reoccurring theme that keeps cropping up, okay? Now, as she followed this non-human down the hallway, she realised that both Sarah and Aidan were also there. They're her two children, each being led by one of the grey-skinned creatures. Then she found herself inside a room with a rounded wall, another detail that repeatedly shows up in other accounts, and she was told to lay on a table that was in the middle of the floor. Perhaps another intriguing detail that Jennie offered is that when the grey-skinned creatures, that she further described as having large heads and large shimmering black eyes, had placed her on the table and seemingly performed some preparation duties, they stepped back towards the wall, almost disappearing in the shadows. Now, Jennie would recall that it was her sense that these entities were merely guards and assistants to the real entity in charge. Now, this is another point we will return to. It is potentially important to the overall big picture of alien abductions, and once more is something that is found in multiple other reports, that these little grey entities aren't the big boss. Now, then whatever procedure she had been brought here for began, she would recall under hypnosis that she was told telepathically that they were performing an important function for them, and that it was helping them to understand more about us. What's more, they were required to take her genetic material. Now, sadly, whatever they were doing, it was very painful. Now, when that procedure was over, she recalled seeing something similar to like a probe with a wire or a tube connected to it. She further recalled being told that it was to do with vibrational frequency and their attempts to alter her. She said that there was a pulse that moved up through my body. Whatever outcome they were looking for, Jennie got the impression that they were pleased with the results. She was placed into a seated position on the table, and the non-human entity who had guided her to the room attempted to convey that the completely human Jennie had nothing to fear from her abductors. Once more, this reference to a completely human Jennie perhaps suggests that within this race of apparent aliens, there are hybridized versions of Jennie there. Perhaps of even more interest is that she would claim to have been told that prior to her birth, they inserted a tiny fragment of themselves into me. So what she's saying is, before she was born, did they ever play with her in her mum's stomach? You know, is she already hybridized? It goes down a rabbit hole, doesn't it? Now, it was also during this encounter when Jennie claims to have been shown images of a dying planet that was once populated with life. She would state that it was her perception that the planet was once home to her abductors, but they had been forced to abandon it. Now, as bizarre as it sounds, it is yet another detail that surfaces in many claims of alien abductions and close encounters. And while there appears to be a slight variation of the details of what led to the disaster that forced such a mass escape, it is yet another detail that connects these spread out encounters. The next thing she realised, she was back in the hallway and is seemingly being led off the ship. A short time later, Sarah and Aidan, her two children, are led to her. Then, without knowing how she got there, she was awake and lying in her bed. What's more, she immediately notices there's blood on her pillow. Now, this is where things get really, she's woken up now, and this is when things start to get a bit surreal. Doug, her husband, had already ventured downstairs, so Jennie left her bed and went to take a shower. However, when she began to remove clumps of her hair while washing, she knew that something truly harrowing had taken place the night before. Even stranger, when she went to use the hairdryer, after only several minutes, it suddenly burnt out. Now, the strangeness continues as she went downstairs. Doug was in the kitchen reading the newspaper, acting as though nothing out of the ordinary had taken place. Jennie walked to the coffee pot, and as she passed one of Aidan's handheld electrical games, it suddenly activated itself. She was becoming more and more unnerved as the minutes went on. Regardless, she joined Doug and was now beginning to prepare breakfast. It was then that another electrical device broke. It was when she was mixing batter for her pancakes that the mixer suddenly ceased working, and the smell of bent out wiring filled the room almost immediately. Doug, still nonchalant about the whole affair, Doug merely stated that they needed a new mixer anyway and was seemingly unconcerned with it. Now, this is where things get even stranger. So Aidan, the young lad, right? Aidan has made his way to the kitchen from upstairs. Jennie greeted him with a good morning, like we all do in the morning, don't we? Before asking how he slept. His response was a bit weird, right? He would claim that he felt like he had been up all night, before adding that he had never believed in UFOs, but last night changed my mind, and that now he knew they were real. What's a weird thing to say first thing in the morning, isn't it? Now, Jennie, doing her best not to look surprised, as well as attempting to interject a rational explanation for this sudden declaration, asked why he had said that and asked if he had been watching UFO movies. Now, Aidan's mood changed to one of irritation as he fired back that his mother knew exactly what he was on about before stomping back to his room. Now, Jennie followed him, again asking what he was talking about. When she reached the doorway of his room, she immediately noticed that he also had blood on his pillow. These dark revelations continued as Jennie quietly made her way to Sarah's room. That's her daughter. When she pushed open the door, Sarah was already awake. The first thing she said to Jennie was that she almost came to wake her up in the night because a helicopter woke me up. And it was right outside my bedroom window, shining a light into my eyes. She continued, she had gotten up and gone to the window and could see the windows of the helicopter and the people looking back at me. Then, though confused even to herself, she simply felt suddenly tired and immediately went back to sleep. Now, even more intriguing and alarming for Jennie is that Sarah claimed to have begun dreaming when she fell asleep. She dreamt of funny little men who entered her room and took her into a little building outside the house. It was when Sarah was telling Jennie this story that she spied a little bit of blood on her pillow. Now, it might be worth our time just going over some of the key aspects of alien abduction. Once more, how many of them are also to be found in the encounters of Jennie Henderson and her family? There are, for example, the most obvious ones, such as missing time and sudden nosebleeds during the evening. There are also such things as malfunctioning electronic equipment, such as, in Jennie's case, the hairdryer, the mixer that burnt out while she was trying to use them. What is also interesting about this particular detail is that it's often associated with paranormal activity, which itself often shows in reports of alien abduction, particularly repeated alien abductions. So what they're saying is maybe paranormal activity and alien abductions are linked. Now, in terms of apparent repeated abductees, Jennie's encounter began when she was very young, around 3 or 4 years old. This was much like her own encounters, which leads on to another repeated detail in other cases, that these abductees are often generational, going both forward to the abductor's own children and backwards to their parents and grandparents. There are then the actual abductions themselves, which are almost identical to multiple others around the world and across the decades. Perhaps the most remarkable detail is the fact that while Jennie often would recall floating up to the ship, usually in a strange beam of light, they most often then could not recall actually entering and would suddenly find themselves in a strange round room or dimly lit hallway. Perhaps the exception to this is the occasions when entering the craft via a ramp on the ground. So, like we've covered before, do they subdue the victim ready for whatever they're going to do? And that's why they don't actually see or remember themselves going into the ship. Now, the creatures themselves, both in their appearance and how they conduct themselves, are all too familiar to be ignored. As we know, they are often described as grey-skinned with large heads and black almond-shaped eyes. But perhaps of more intrigue is the robot-like nature with which they operate, without emotion, as if they themselves are doing the bidding of a higher rank of extraterrestrials. Indeed, many reports, like that of Jennie's, state that there are often taller entities that appear during these abduction scenarios that appear very much to be in charge, at which point these shorter grey-skinned creatures take a step back during the medical procedures that follow. Now, there is even a rumour that they could even be robots. Now, some people are saying that these grey entities, the greys as we know them, could even be alien-made robots, machines. But you just don't know, do you? Now, these procedures are almost always identical, with particular concentration on reproduction, and even taken samples with the apparent desire to clone or breed from these samples. There is too much out there for this not to be true, I reckon. I mean, every abduction scenario you come on, they're always interested in reproduction. So this hibernation program might have been going on for thousands of years. There is even a case that we are hibernation aliens. You know, they've already played with us once. Now, look, with this last point in mind, we should perhaps also consider some of the more disturbing aspects of the alien abduction encounters. The memory of specialised tanks that contain what appear to be alien human fetuses. Are these alien abductions really a result of an alien human hibernation program? And if that is the case, and this is an operation that is beneficial for humanity, or one that will result in the discreet and unnoticed takeover of our planet? While such suggestions are bordering on the preposterous for some, if there is any credibility in the ample number of alien abduction cases on record, then it's hard to ignore at least the possibility of such seemingly outlandish otherworldly project. Indeed, it would appear that the more details we find that match, as clearer as the overall picture becomes on one level, the murkier it gets on another. Okay, because we don't know what they're up to. It's quite clear they're up to something. Another case of repeated alien abductions that truly resonate with others, and there is much to examine about the alien abduction encounter of Jennie Henderson, how they resonate with many other similar claims, and where they fit in the overall big picture of the UFO and alien question. If we assume for one moment that those behind these regular abductions are of an extraterrestrial nature, then for what purpose are they taking place? And perhaps more collectively important, are they beneficial to humanity as a whole? If, as we mentioned earlier, Jennie and many others around the world are unwilling and unwitting participants in some kind of human hibernation program, will they one day be replaced by what essentially be clones as part of some kind of alien takeover of Earth? A bizarre notion, admittedly. So what do you think? What do you think, believers? Do you believe in the hibernation program? So this Jennie Henderson story, and I will continue with alien abduction stories because I think they're fascinating, okay? Now, we've covered 4, all similar in many, many ways. And even though you can honestly say some of them are going to be fake, of course they are. I'm not saying Jennie Henderson's is fake, but with the thousands out there, some are up just to get the limelight, some are out just to get clicks and likes, some of them are just liars. You can't ignore that, but not all of these can be liars, not all of them. So, look, the Jennie Henderson story. Please tell me what you think. Do you believe or do you not believe? So, look, drop me a line in the comments. That would be fantastic. Please like and subscribe. That would be great. And if you hit that notification bell, when I do the next video, you'll hear about it. Okay? Thanks very much, and I'll catch you on the next one.